Welcome back to another amazing episode of Books with Ken. I'm excited that you're back here with me again. I am blown away excited by the amount of people that are watching these episodes. You know, my goal is to be crazy living life with my hair on fire, running all over North America and grabbing authors that have exceptional works that I think that you're going to like. And today I'm joined by Dr. Betty Uribe. Dr. Uribe, Betty, is the author of a brand new book. It's called #Values, The Secret to Top-Level Performance in Business and Life. And I have a very close understanding of the value of this book. Betty, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Ken. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, I know I've caught you early. I know it's first thing in the morning out in Los Angeles. I can see the beautiful palm trees out your window. Betty, let's jump right into it. You have had an amazing journey in your life from poverty, leaving Central America, to now likely one of the most respected women in banking in America. And not just that, but one of the most respected senior executives in banking in the United States of America. You regularly have audiences with top politicians, with state and federal dignitaries, even a private audience at the Vatican. You can put all that in your repertoire. With all of that accomplished, Betty, why did you need to write a book?
Well, Ken, if you think about when the economy started coming down and there were a lot of people that were in top level positions all over the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world, in academia, in politics, in sports, even in clergy. People continue to fall. And during that time, I thought, you know, our children, our generation's children are going to grow up with no role models. And the role models they had all of a sudden fell just like that. It takes a lot of time to build credibility. And all of a sudden they lost credibility and they fell very quickly. So I started seeking and looking for role models around values and around leadership. My doctorate is in organizational leadership from Pepperdine University. And I started seeking for my dissertation values-based leaders who were congruent with their values, who permeated those values through their organization, and also created top-level results, because at the end of the day, we get paid to produce results. And I found some leaders, and I interviewed folks from the White House, from the Pentagon, interviewed CEOs, and found some commonalities between the CEOs and these high-level individuals. So why did I do this? I did this because when I came from Bogota, Colombia, my mother was the wife of a millionaire. And she was very clear on what values she had. She wanted us to have a good life. She wanted us to have peace in our life. And she wanted us to be able to go to church. And we had a good life. We did not have peace in our life. And so she left everything. She gave me the choice of coming to the United States and having peace. And so my value system has always been very clear, and the decisions that I make in my life have always been very clear. And that's something that I found in these leaders. So the reason I wrote the book was to be able to inject values back into leadership around the globe, which is something that we desperately need right now.
Right. Betty, I know you are one of the most humble business executives that I've ever had a chance to communicate with. And I really think that you're not giving yourself enough credit. You essentially, if I could summarize what you just said, you essentially grew up with these values instilled to your life for as long as you can remember. It was forced on you. Your mother, in your upbringing, in your early days, harped on these. And as you grew up, I think it became very clear to me in our conversations that you started seeing a lack of values around you. You know, even in your earlier days, you started seeing a lack of values in people, in business, and you knew that focusing on values was giving you this peace, but you were seeing that. And then you ended up in school where you were given an opportunity to turn your passion for values into a study. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct.
How in the world did you get the doors open to some of the senior ranking military generals in the United States, some of the top politicians in the world? You have interviewed hundreds of politicians, business owners, clergy. How did you do this?
You know, I was thinking about that this morning as I was driving to work and thinking about what I'm about to do next week at one of the inauguration galas and how I actually got invited.
Okay, wait, don't lose your thought. Folks, she is speaking and keynoting at one of the inauguration galas next week for the presidency, the new president, President Trump. She's been asked to come and speak and keynote at a gala. Okay, you're not good at edifying yourself.
So I was thinking about how did that happen, right? And I was thinking about some of the things that I do very naturally that I think I probably have to put on paper. But first of all, we are all human beings. And one of the things that I was taught by my Aunt Ruby, who received us when we came from Colombia at her home, was, Betty, it doesn't matter who that person is. They can be the President of the United States. The only difference between them and you is the amount of debt they have. They probably have more debt than you do, but they get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, and they do the same thing that you do. And so there's really no difference. If you want to get as high as you want to in the world, you actually can. And I believe that. I believe that today. There's really no difference between anybody else and us. It's just the circumstances that are different, but we're not any different. Right. So I don't approach anybody as if they were too big or too good. Going to the Vatican in 2 weeks and in presenting a thank you book to the Monsignor and the Pope. And I want to tell you that I talk to them as they were my best friend. The people that are in government, generals from the White House, very high level people, I don't approach them as if they were somebody that is unapproachable. I firmly believe that however you behave with people, that's what is going to come right back to you. Right. So if you're integrous, if you are real, if you are just yourself, and it's not easy to open up yourself and to say, I came to be poor. I got clothes from the garage sales, and the church brought us food because we didn't have money, and I cleaned houses when I was 12. A lot of people have too much pride to actually open yourself up like that. So how I have gotten to individuals is I usually ask for 5 minutes. Do you have 5 minutes? If they don't have 5 minutes, I say, do you have 60 seconds? And they pretty much get shamed into giving me 60 seconds because nobody does not have 60 seconds, right? So in 60 seconds, I can return 3 phone calls in 60 seconds. 60 seconds is a long time, so I can say my story very quickly and my purpose and why I'm doing this. I want to build scholarships for 100 children around the globe, 100 children in each continent with the proceeds of this book. When people get that, and I tell them my background and why I have such a passion for injecting values back into leadership, they take that 60 seconds. I can turn it into 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and then a face-to-face interview. And then I get invited to be keynote in that inauguration gala.
So what I took away from this is you respect them, your values are congruent, and you approach them humbly, and it works. It's amazing. Well, look, in a second, I'm going to ask you about the one thing, which is the most important part of our time together. But before I do that, Hashtag Values seems to me to be a book that's for everybody. And that contradicts what I like to believe. I like to believe that every book has a specific audience. But if we were going to look at, we know that the book is for everybody, but if there was one group of people in America or in the world that you could most help with this book, who is that?
The one group of people, I would say leaders.
Leaders in business, in government.
Leaders in any area, any leader that leads people would have tremendous value from this book.
Because they will lead more effectively if they understand congruent values, or they understand how to.
Because they will learn how to create sustainable results through a values-based strategy. So if you think about, now what I do is I do turnarounds in banks. I presented in Chicago to 30 banks around the world as a best-in-class turnaround in the world last fall. And one of the common themes that I found in the leaders that are depicted in the book and in what I do is when you lead with congruency, you build trust. And if you think about trust, that is the essence of what it takes to lead an organization, because we're all in the people business. If you're in academia, if you're in government, if you're in business, if you are in sports, you are in the people business.
Right.
And so when you're leading people, you learn the secret to really leading people. You learn the secret to creating trust. And by getting the trust, people will do things for you. People will follow your lead. And then your results will be sustainable.
You know, Betty, I was looking at the cover of the book, and I see your endorsements are world caliber. Michael Gerber, Bob Carr, the Vatican, CNBC, the Washington Post. But my eye got caught on Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey is clearly the world heavyweight champion of leadership. And what's most interesting is he wrote a book called Speed of Trust. And you just mentioned trust. And as you mentioned it, I had a bit of an epiphany. It's having read your book, I know that your book is a roadmap. And if you focus on adding and instilling values in your life, it's almost like the keys to establishing trust with another.
Absolutely. Stephen Covey and I had a long conversation about this. And we were talking about doing some things together, because he writes about trust and I write about congruency and values. And those two actually go together. And absolutely, in his book, he talks about how when trust goes up, the speed goes up. When trust goes up, your value goes up. When you lead with values, so that's when trust goes up. How do you create trust? This is the fundamental way to create trust.
You're not going to create trust without values.
You can't create trust without values. And you've got to be very clear on what your values are. And you've got to surround yourself with people who have the same values. I work for California Bank and Trust. I'm here in the office. And the value system of the company, the value system of David Blackford, our CEO, and Harris Simmons, who is highlighted in the book, our chairman, is very much aligned with who I am. Had they not had the same values, I wouldn't have come to work for this company.
Right.
But they align with the same values. They care about the employees. They care about the customer. They have the customer and the employee completely at the top of their value system. And that's how I am. I've got people at the top of my value system. So when you create that, then you can create the trust. And when you create the trust, then you can create the performance.
Well, I think I could spend the rest of the day sitting here talking to you about values and about this incredible book, but we're coming down to the end of the show. I want to next ask you the most important question, and my viewers know how serious I am about this. Having published thousands of books, I realize that the greatest books in history are all remembered really for one thing. One of my favorite books is Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell's book. It's remembered for 10,000 hours, the 10,000 hours of work it takes to become an expert. Betty, I know there's a plethora of things in #values that could be important things, but what's the one thing? What's going to be remembered forever about this book?
I think the one thing that you can always remember about the book is in your decisions, when your actions are congruent with your values, all of your decisions will always be right. In fact, I put it in a little giveaway that I gave to my VIP customers and to my employees. I feel very strongly that everything that is in the book, there's a decision model in there that talks about how do you make decisions based on values. When you are making a decision, whether to buy a company, to get married, to have a child, to sell a company, to get retired, when you align all of your decisions with your values, all of your decisions will be right on. Everything will fall into place.
Well, there's so much more we could have talked about. I might have to have you back on the show. I know that there's an entire decision-making model built into this book where whatever decisions you're trying to make with your company or your life or your church or your government agency, there's an actual model that Betty gives you in the book that you can insert your question in one hand, and she will walk you through an analysis based on values to help you come up with a decision that will be right every time. Betty, I wish we could talk longer. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, Ken. Really appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
And listen, if you want to get a copy of #Values, as always, there's a link to the book above the video or beside the video or below it. It depends on where you see it. My name is Ken Dunn, and you've been here on Books with Ken with Dr. Betty Uribe. It's been a pleasure to see you here, and I'm sure we'll see you here again soon.
Thank you so much, Ken.